The harsh reality about sports that fans do not like to accept is that it's a business. So a lot of star athletes for teams will come and go. And it's always interesting after a star leaves their team and they come back to play their team in their old team's crowd. And it's interesting to see how they interact with the fans, whether they are praised or hated. So today we'll be going over times that players have been cheered for or booed when they have returned to their former teams to play them. And let's get right to it. To start it off, for players that were hated in their return to their old team, is one of the most notable ones, Kevin Durant's return to Oklahoma City. So for context, there was a dynamic duo in OKC with Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant and James Harden at one point, but that's not part of this right now. And Kevin Durant left in the offseason to go to the Golden State Warriors to form a super team there. And in his first return, it was crazy how the fans reacted to him. They were booing him, kept trash talking him. But the Warriors won, and Kevin Durant played good in that first appearance. But then comes the second time, and Russell Westbrook is fueled for revenge. Because after the first game, at the end, there was a back and forth between Westbrook and KD. And Westbrook definitely showed up for what he was saying, and OKC would eventually go on to win that game with Westbrook dominating on defense and offense, and KD really couldn't get in any sort of groove, and KD was eventually seen on the bench at the end. Yeah. Now for loved, we got Cody Bellinger's return to Dodger Stadium. Cody Bellinger was an outfielder who was on the LA Dodgers, and he had an MVP year in 2019, but with his tenure with the Dodgers, he would go downhill every year since until having a horrible 2022 season. But in the offseason, he signed with the Chicago Cubs, and he made his return, and he got a standing ovation back at Dodger Stadium. The difference here with KD, where I think this was loved, was because KD left and betrayed them because he was being a snake, where Bellinger really didn't have any other choice. And Bellinger also helped bring them a ring, where KD did not in OKC. And anyway, back to the point, he would get a standing ovation in his first at-bat, which unfortunately had a delay of game, or however that thing works in baseball, which I feel like there should be an exception to that rule, but that's for another time. And he would make some great plays. He had that one catch, though, that robbed the home run, I believe. And fans started booing him a bit. But for the most part, he was well respected in his return. And they respected him for everything that he gave to them. And in that series, the Cubs won the first game. Dodgers won second. But the Cubs would win the series with the third win. So maybe Cody got a little bit of revenge. Hated, Brett Favre's return to Lambeau Field. Brett Favre was the quarterback for the Packers for a very long time, winning them a Super Bowl, but eventually they drafted Aaron Rodgers, and he eventually was replaced, and he retired. He said he retired, so people were like, oh, he retired a Packer, but then he would join the Jets for a year. Didn't go too well, so then he retired again. And then this is where it gets really bad. He goes to the rival Minnesota Vikings to play there. And that's when fans started to turn on him. They turned on him when he returned to Lambeau Field, since they would play 2 times a year since they're in the same division. And Brett Favre would go on to have a good game winning. He threw 4 touchdowns in the win against the Packers. But in the end, I think the Packers really got the upper hand on him, because Aaron Rodgers would go on to have a debatably better career and win a Super Bowl, where Brett Favre would go to an NFC championship, but lost due to Bountygate. And yeah. And for the final one, we're going to do loved Zdeno Chara's return to Boston. Zdeno Chara was an all-time great for the Boston Bruins, and he was part of this big part of the Stanley Cup team in 2011, and for a lot of years he was the captain of the team. But he eventually got older. He had some problems in their Stanley Cup year in 2019. Well, they lost the Stanley Cup that year, but he had a lot of problems. And really, eventually, him and the Bruins would part ways, but only for one season, as he would go to the Washington Capitals. But he didn't really have a huge role on that team, but fans still kept respect for him because it wasn't really his choice to leave that much. But yeah, the fans had a lot of respect for him when he came back. They had some weird video thing they showed at the beginning of the game, which kind of stinks because this was the COVID year, so they couldn't have a formal tribute to him. But interesting fact, that same year, which this was Zdeno Chara's last year, they would play the Bruins in the playoffs, and the Bruins swept them. So his last game was against the Bruins. And he would sign a one-day contract, I believe, with the Bruins after he retired. So I guess he retired a Bruin. That will conclude today's video. Maybe I'll make another one in the future. Also, what could other future stars' returns be like for the future? Like, what will Mookie Betts' return to Boston be like? Or Aaron Rodgers' return to Green Bay? I guess we'll have to wait and see. And I will see you later.
Due to the various uncertainties surrounding my position as it relates to the team's new ownership, I've decided to resign as the head coach of the New York Jets.